Live your life, boy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Conspiracy Farm, where we don't start the conspiracies, we just add the water. And now, your host of the most state-of-the-art, most informed podcast on the interweb, I present to you Pat Miletich and Jeffrey Wilson. Ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for war?
Yeah, rear naked choke a Cocker Spaniel, bro. You know what I'm saying?
Bro.
Change the neighborhood up.
Conspiracy Farm. Go. Check it out.
Greetings, salutations, ladies and gentlemen, as we are about to knock one out once again for the archives, the Conspiracy Farm, on this fine, cloudy, rainy day down here in St. Louis in the year of our Lord 2023. As always, rolling shotgun with my homeboy, Patrick J. Miletich. How are we doing today, champ?
I'm doing splendid, and I know you're excited about this interview. Someone who's quite an expert in certain fields of exploration, we'll put it.
Yeah, you know, as you know, many people know, you know, anybody who's messed with the farm, this is where it started for me, going down the rabbit hole. I don't remember the exact date, but it was around 88, 89, maybe 90. Yes, I'm old. It was a documentary on the A&E network called Reasonable Doubt. It was the first time I'd ever really heard anything in depth about any skepticism about the assassination of President John Fitzgerald Kennedy. And there was a person on there who has gone on to become lore in the JFK world, Dr. Sarah Weck, forensic pathologist, who I actually had the chance to interview, which is posted here on the network. It was like bucket list. I'm geeking out. Very similar today for our guest, Matt Crumpton. He is the host, creator of the Solving JFK Podcast. How are we doing today, sir?
Doing well, man. Doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Without a doubt, man. Without a doubt. This is one of those, gosh, there's so many spokes on this wheel. There's so many rabbit holes you can go down. And for me, man, I don't know, just the way my brain has been geared throughout the years, it was just a foregone conclusion to me, almost immediately, hearing just some of the stuff that Lee Harvey Oswald, whether he acted at all, did not act alone. And there was just so much forensic evidence, so much medical evidence, so much crazy stuff. But I would always go down the circumstantial shit, like, you know, just, I don't know, his ties to, you know, David Ferry, intelligence agencies, et cetera, stuff you couldn't necessarily put your finger on and prove. But again, to me, it was just like, you know, it just seemed whatever. I just made that leap just automatically, and I could be wrong. I don't think I was. But what Matthew has done with his series here, which began, ironically enough, November 22nd, 2022, he's really gone deep down the rabbit hole as far as the medical evidence, the physical evidence, which, you know, he brings into contest a little bit, if you will, as far as like how legit was the autopsy, the ballistics, et cetera, et cetera. And again, there's so many names and stuff to get thrown around here, and we're going to try to keep it with what Matthew has presented. But I have to ask you, what was your beginning to this conversation and how deep you have gone down? And I think I know the answer, but the role Ralph Leon Yates had in your tumble down this rabbit hole, because I'd never, in my years of done this stuff, never heard of Ralph Leon Yates, but he's so crucial to you getting down the rabbit hole. Talk to me, brother.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, I mean, the thing, you know, probably just like you, the thing that always flagged this as an event that I, you know, want to come back to and wanted to learn as much as I could, you know, whenever I had a chance, is probably when I first started to become cognizant of it. And that would have been around the time the movie JFK came out. I was born in 1981. So, you know, I was about 10 years old or so. And I just remember hearing, oh, the president was killed. There's a video showing his body go back into the left. I mean, kind of looked like he got hit from the front. And they say, no, it's a guy that shot him 3 times from behind. And then there wasn't a trial or anything because some other guy then killed that guy because he felt bad for the president's wife. And then he died a few years later. You know what I mean? It's just like
of a mysterious, very aggressive cancer.
Right. So it was, you know, it was always a little bit weird. And then I had a chance in law school. I'm sorry, a chance in, I knew I was going to law school, but I spent my last semester in college at Ohio University as a student teacher, teaching American history, sophomore to the present, because they don't really care what your studies are to get into law school. They just, you know, at the time it was really kind of more about the grades. So I was like, oh, I'll do this social studies. I'm interested in history. That's cool. And anyway, I basically showed the class videos because I wanted to, I'm a senior in college at this point. So my primary focus is how do I go out with my friends and not do work, right? So I was like, oh, JFK assassination. There's a lot of videos on that. So I had to pick a topic and spend a week on a topic. And, I tried to keep it balanced. I showed them like, I think it's like the Nova PBS video that's like they reconstructed and proved that, the single bullet theory really is correct. I showed them that. And then of course I dove straight into it and showed them a couple of episodes of The Men Who Killed Kennedy. So that was fun. But yeah, so I mean, what really made me dive down this road, to be totally honest with you, is I thought I wanted to be a politician, and I thought I wanted to so that's why I went to law school. And then I started to look more into that whole world, and I sort of learn more about the world around us. I follow you on social media, so your observations about the world are consistent with my observations about the world. You know what I mean? So, but that I wasn't always in that place. There used to be a time when I believed that, hey, we can do this through like sort of the proper traditional channels and have some sort of change or whatever in the world. So once I realized I wasn't going to run for office, which I came very close to doing, I needed to sort of scratch that itch in some way. And the thing I was the most passionate about was the Kennedy assassination. So I thought, I'm going to put all my energy into this. And, really what happened is I read the book, JFK and the Unspeakable. That really kind of prompted my re-interest in this, along with a book called Reclaiming Parkland by James D. Eugenio. Basically, reading those, I kind of came to the conclusion, okay, this is a conspiracy. And then I went to Facebook, the Facebook groups, hoping I could find, like-minded people, and let's figure this out. Like, let's take action, whatever. Like, let's have new hearings and all these things. And I just got attacked immediately on so many of these message boards. And the people who were attacking me, a lot of times had citations, and that's when I realized, like, if you want real, you've got to just start from scratch and go, all right, let's compare each issue point by point, and let's have citations for everything, and let's sort of let's do what our schools still teach children that the news does, right? Let's provide information and let people decide based on the objective information. Obviously, I have a little bit of a slant because I can't unknow the things that I know, but I do try to take all issues into consideration, because I want to figure out what actually happened. And part of that is going, well, it's not just like everything is like the wildest conspiracy, right? Occam's razor is a common notion that's used to knock down conspiracies. Occam's razor is, the idea that whatever the most likely thing is, that's probably what happened.
Yes. And
Occam's razor is a very useful tool, no doubt. But it's not applicable to something that's complex. Okay?
Well, and in this case with Occam's razor, it becomes a measure of like deductive reasoning. We start deducing why it isn't as simple as this dipshit with his Italian rifle on the 6th floor. Not dipshit. He was actually a really smart guy, Lee Harvey Oswald. But I don't think he had. We'll get into it, but I don't think he had anything to do with putting any fingers on any triggers.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But so long story short, I realized, like, okay, I'm not going to be this guy that's like a comment warrior, because sometimes they would say things and I would go, that's a good point. I didn't realize that. Here's an example. And this is coming up in a couple of episodes. There's a guy named Domingo Benavides. He was the first person on the scene for the J.D. Tippit shooting. He is sort of the prime witness, 15 feet away from the whole thing. And there's this thing in conspiracy lore, because it's in The Men Who Killed Kennedy, that Benavides had a twin brother, Eddie Benavides, and his brother was murdered a month before Domingo testified before the Warren Commission to sort of show him what that he needed to like act right and say what they wanted him to say. Well, turns out that's total garbage, because his brother was killed a year after Domingo already testified. It was over, and it's totally unrelated. And there's all this evidence that shows what that his brother's murder was about. So the point is, that's garbage. So we can delete that. That's no longer under consideration, right? And I think what happens is, this is like look, this is a great metaphor for politics, because what happens, and we'll start talking about the substance here, but what happens is one person makes a point, and then someone else, instead of addressing the point made by the first person, they bring up a counterpoint on a totally different issue. This is called whataboutism in politics. But so what I'm trying to do is pin it down and go, no,
Yeah.
issue by issue. You can't leave. Okay, let's do this one. All right, you say this and you say this. Okay. So I would say that's the unique thing that I'm doing is I'm literally going issue by issue. Every episode has a transcript, solvingjfkpodcast.com, citations. So I'm a lawyer by trade. I was a litigator for years. And I thought, look, I'm not making this stuff up, so I'll just put the citations for every factual proposition I have. And if someone says I'm stupid and wrong, I'll say, well, look, I can't know everything, so please tell me. And also, it's not me saying it; it's the HSCA.
Yes.
Whatever.
And that's what's hugely important as we, my information is the information, and people are so very contrary to things, that they don't necessarily agree with. But that's what's so cool about your presentation. You cite things; these things are very official, and you keep yourself. I mean, just listening to you, I can kind of tell during the show. I mean, actually, you just still present everything very objectively. Like, what the fuck about this? What about this? Wow, this is strange. I mean, you just bring up all the different points. And I'm not sure exactly where to start, but I mean, I guess we could start with the murder weapon itself, man. It first came out that it was a 7.65 Mauser. You play the soundbite very well, man. Roger Craig, a Dallas policeman, came through and he says in the thing, stamped there right there on the barrel was 7.65 Mauser. And unfortunately, Roger Craig became one of the people who wound up, dying, from a suicide with 2 shots to his head or whatever it was. It was one of those very suspicious deaths. But, even on ABC, NBC, CBS that day and the next day, they were like, it's a fucking Mauser, 7.65 Mauser. And all of a sudden, this Carcano comes up. What are your thoughts? I mean, and Pat, feel free to jump in here at any time. I know we're nerding out, but feel free to jump in.
No, it's fine. I definitely got questions, but I'm just sitting back right now.
Cool.
Right on. So, I mean, the biggest thing on the Mauser for me is Seymour Weitzman.
Yes.
And who's the other guy? Weitzman, and is it Boone? I think it's Boone. But there are 2 sheriffs aside from Roger Craig. So, Roger Craig is a very divisive figure. If you're the conspiracy side, you love Roger Craig. He's an American hero. Like literally, there should be statues of Roger Craig in every city, right? If you are a Warren Report defender, then Roger Craig is a liar who's a psycho, and you feel sorry for him. Like those are your 2 options with Roger Craig. But at any rate,
but Walter Cronkite is not a psycho, and he reported on the Mauser. You know what I mean?
Right, exactly. Of course. Well, and here's the main thing. So I like to look at the records. Like, if I had to argue this case in court, what documentary evidence could I have that would be persuasive, right? And I think one of the most persuasive things when it comes to this is the written affidavits that were signed by the sheriffs on the day of the assassination. So, the first day this happens, it's not like, let's assume there's a conspiracy and there's whatever dark forces at play that are there, like a marionette, pulling the strings and doing all these things like that wasn't going on as much if it was going on immediately when things happen, right? You're going to have Occam's razor, right? Like people are going to act how they're going to act. They're going to report what they believe to be true in writing as the first thing they say. The first thing people say, especially if it's in writing and it's a sworn affidavit, I tend to give that the most credit. Okay, not the thing that they change after the 5th time they testify before the Warren Commission, right? So,
but as a lawyer, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but as a lawyer, haven't they notoriously said like eyewitness testimony on the events that happened that day are so unreliable the day you report, or when you go into court because your memory is not the same, or is that?
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, though?
Yeah, well, when it comes to criminal cases, eyewitness testimony is not helpful at all because people look similar a lot of times, and people don't remember faces. You know what I mean? What eyewitness testimony is good for is if you get a bunch of people to agree on a general proposition. You know what I mean? Like, did the car stop in the middle of the road or not? What was the which direction do you think the shots came from? Whatever. And that's a separate issue because there's an echo chamber. But it's not good for someone saying, hey, I saw this guy and here's a lineup, and okay, this guy out of the people in the lineup, person number 3 looks the most like the guy I saw. So why don't you lock him up? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of the issue. But at any rate, so you got Mauser and I believe it's Boone who I'm sorry, Mauser. You got Weitzman and Boone who both say Mauser in their affidavit. So think about this. Okay, the story we're told is they found the Carcano. They initially misidentified it as a Mauser, and then Fritz, the police captain, shows up and he goes, "No, it's a Carcano." And they go, "Oh, okay, it's a Carcano. All right, well then riddle me this. Why, hours later at the sheriff's department, when the affidavit is written and they sign it in a murder of the president of the United States, pretty big case. You would think you'd want to get it right. It's only a 1-page affidavit. It's not like it's a 50-page contract. Okay, so they both say in their affidavits that it's a Mauser, but this is hours after the fact that matter was supposed to have been cleared up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and it gets into the conversation we're going to have a little bit later here in a minute about CE. I think it's the Commission Exhibit 399, the magic bullet, where it's in the chain of custody. People are like, well, this looks nothing like the bullet. I mean,
right.
Yeah.
So that's on the rifle. I mean, that's it. But look, the bottom line is the Carcano's in the National Archives. We have a picture of Lieutenant Day bringing the Carcano out of the building. So,
and was he the one who was holding it over his head? Somebody was walking through the okay.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. That the Mauser was reported literally like that day and the next day and the next, I think 2 or 3 days, so they corrected with the Carcano. But like that officer walking through the jail there, the Dallas jail, with the Carcano seemed like, I don't know. Obviously, they're all trying to scramble to get their stories together because I mean, I don't know. There are multiple shooters, multiple shit coming from multiple directions. It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. If it wasn't a Carcano, it had to have been the Mauser. We're like, maybe it was both, you know?
Right. But that's just, I mean, it ends up not mattering a ton.
No.
But it is a thing that's weird. And I think if you go, what I don't understand is someone who goes, well, we know, like someone who has no interest or curiosity at all about how these two sheriffs could have put it on their affidavit hours later. And oh, by the way, Weitzman used to run a sporting goods store. And at this time, sporting goods store meant a gun and rifle store too. Right. So he was an expert on firearms. He was the expert on firearms at the sheriff's department. So it's, if I had to bet, I would bet that it was a Mauser, but the challenge is I just don't have, it's gone if it was. But
and again, you have, like you said, you have contrary opinion on people like Roger Craig, but he said consistently, stamped there right on the barrel. 7.65 Mauser. And Walter Cronkite, it's anyway, it's that kind of that fog of war, and they all start cleaning it up as things go on. Jesus, where do we jump to next? So it seems like in the single bullet theory, we'll get to the ballistic stuff here in a minute, but it sounds like James Tagg really fucks this all up for them. I mean, literally, he screws this whole story up as far as 3 shots, etc. Who's James Tagg, bro?
That's great. That's a great piece of analysis there.
Yes.
I mean, you're truly correct. James Tagg is a bystander who is standing at the intersection of. He's basically a street over from Elm, where the limo was fired upon. So now there's dispute as to whether it was the first. So I'm talking about the official story right now. Okay,
yes.
A lot of people think a lot of different things. There's a lot of numbers of shots that are alleged, but the official story is 3 shots. And the 3rd shot is Kennedy's headshot, and the idea is the first shot must have either the first shot missed or the second shot missed. They're not really clear on that. That's kind of open ended, but whichever one missed hit concrete and then nicked James Tagg and cut his face, and he spoke to a police officer, and so it's all on the record. And they could have just covered that up, but instead they stuck with it and they relied upon it. And of course LBJ didn't believe it. We have we got a phone call between Richard Russell, a senator who's on the Warren Commission, telling LBJ he doesn't believe it. It was in I think episode 19. We got same episode. We got J. Edgar Hoover talking about how different shots hit Connolly and Kennedy.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that out because it's in my notes because I listened to that conversation, and J. Edgar Hoover lists all these shots and they're accounted for, never once mentioning James Tagg. I realized they were cleaning this up at this point, but he was like, nope, this shot hit here, this shot hit that, and never mentioned the one that missed. So it's like even the head of the FBI at that time was still, kind of putting it together, I guess, or I don't know. doing their
Yeah.
best to maintain that three bullet, three shots kind of theory.
Well, what's really notable is Hoover says that a full bullet fell out of JFK's head onto the stretcher or the whatever he was
Under
laying
his
on.
ear, which is another thing I've never heard of. Expound on that, bro. You're going there.
It's crazy. I mean, there's a nurse who came forward, Audrey Hinchcliffe, I think her name is. She came. I get her. That's whenever I say Hinchcliffe, I don't know if I'm thinking of the comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, but Audrey, Hinchcliffe, I believe her name is. The 50th anniversary, she came forward for the first time and said that she saw a full intact bullet between the president's ear and shoulder. So I'm trying to think about like where that would be. It's like
basically you're like kind of
maybe?
trapezius area, Patrick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
But the question is, why did no one else say that in Parkland? So that's the thing I don't really get. But there's an FBI report that backs up what this nurse says from the day of the assassination, and then a week later we have a telephone call recorded between Hoover and Lyndon Johnson where he says the same thing. So what this tells me is that this intact bullet, which, did it fall on Kennedy's head? Did it, the district attorney Henry Wade and Governor Connolly say the intact bullet came out of him and he was there to see it, but then someone else found it on a stretcher. And oh, by the way, the doctor who did surgery on Connolly gave a press conference after CE 399 was found, like 1 or 2 in the afternoon, saying the bullet was still in Connolly's leg, still in his thigh.
So you're jumping the gun on me, but I'm glad you're there because that's a huge point of contention. Another thing I had no fucking clue of. I always had questions, and it's like when I talked to Cyril Wecht, I didn't have much time with him, but we mostly talked about the single bullet theory in CE 399. Like, how could this bullet have done all of this stuff, created all these wounds, and look so pristine? That was a huge question, obviously, but when I was listening to you, I had no idea of the timeline of when that thing was supposedly dropped off on a stretcher. And it's like, no, that couldn't be the bullet that did this, because the surgeon's like, I haven't even pulled it out of his leg yet. And this was hours later.
Right. I mean, I would say that the two issues in the single bullet theory, you got to separate into two things. Is a single bullet theory possible? And then separately, is CE 399, the quote, the bullet they have at the National Archives, is that the one that did it, if it's possible, right? So let's first talk, is that the one that did it? There's this whole chain of custody thing, right?
And please get into that, because that was another huge part of it, because it went down like 10, 12 people, and some people were like, no, this doesn't even look close to what I handed you. And this is supposedly the bullet. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. There were six people who possessed it. So it went from Tomlinson, who was basically an orderly, who found it on a stretcher in the hallway of the first floor, I believe, maybe the first or second floor. But it wasn't. They don't have any certainty whatsoever that it's tied to Connolly. It wasn't found on Connolly's stretcher. It was found on a stretcher.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So that's the starting point. If you believe the official story, it was found on a stretcher. Okay. And then it was given to the head of hospital security, O.P. Wright, who then gave it to Secret Service agent Richard Johnson, who gave it to the head of the Secret Service, James Rowley, who gave it to an FBI agent, Elmer Todd, who then gave it to the FBI firearms expert, Robert Frazier. So that's the chain.
Didn't one of them actually etch their initials or their name in one of them to kind of...
Todd and Frazier both etched their initials in them, and you can see their initials. And there was a lot of debate for a long time about Todd. Actually, it's in the DiEugenio Oliver Stone documentary series that's out. They mention Elmer Todd being his initials not being on the bullet. And then right after that came out, the National Archives came up with like this super, high res 3D scanning. And sure enough, they're like, look, here his initials are on the bullet right here. So that's the only fact that I've seen proven wrong from that documentary series. But at any rate, the main thing is for me is this on the chain of custody. Like you said, all four of the people, I'm sorry, not all four. The two people in the middle say that they're not sure. Oh, I know, they're showing the bullet. They go, no, I can't identify that as the same bullet. But that's not the same thing as saying, no way, that looks nothing like it. It's definitely not that one. They're just saying, I really don't know. I'm not sure, right? But here's what's tricky. There's a document called CE 2011, and that is the master summary by the FBI of the chain of custody. It goes into all the detail. Here's, it started here, and here's how it got to where it is now. And in that document, it talks about this FBI agent named Bardwell Odom, and he supposedly went and interviewed the first two people to possess it, Tomlinson and Wright. And importantly, in this summary document, it says that Tomlinson and Wright both identified it as the same bullet. So according to the official summary document, the first two people that possessed it go, yeah, this is the same one. This is it. That's the one, right? Well, so again, supposedly this is Bardwell Odom, who went to Parkland with the magic bullet itself and showed it to him and said, hey, does this look like the one that you found? Okay. So this researcher, Dr. Gary Aguilar, reaches out to Bardwell Odom, who was like 80 years old at the time. And this is all on tape. He recorded everything and asks him for the details of this. And then Odom tells him, I never possessed CE 399. I would have remembered that. And I've never even seen it before. I definitely didn't go to Parkland to speak to these guys. If I did, there would be a 302 report, and that would have been declassified.
Yes.
He's like, but I'm sure that I didn't. So sure enough, the FBI declassified all of their 302 reports that were related to supporting the summary document, CE 2011. And sure enough, none of Odom's reports are in there. So he says he didn't talk to them. There's no underlying receipts for him talking to them, which you would expect to see. So I believe that's pretty strong proof of fraud right there. So that was pretty shocking to me, and it's overwhelming, to me that one point. The counterpoint is Bardwell Odom's old and he's a liar. See, if you're going to believe the Warren report, you have to, in many cases, you have to go. This is the biggest weakness of believing the Warren report. You have to believe so many witnesses are just liars, or they're bad people, or they just want to get rich or whatever. And the downside of believing the conspiracy is you have to just take some leaps that sound crazy, absent all of the information filling it in. And some of the information's not there. So some of the things still sound crazy.
Well, I mean, part of being not there. I mean, if the throat wound to Kennedy, like, where's that bullet? Where'd that go? And then it gets into the back wound and all of this different kind of forensic stuff. I mean, it really is. And even, I guess we can get into it because everyone, again, check out my man's show, dude. Solving JFK. It's a deep dive into this stuff. But as it relates to the tampering of the body, potentially, it showing up to being loaded on Air Force One in a particular coffin and then showing up in Bethesda in a different coffin. And I don't know how much I give credence to that shit. And it's almost the nuance that I don't really care about because I know it was all fuckery anyway. But getting down to the nooks and crannies like you have is very interesting because the fuckery is so deep, dude. Again, the forensic or the autopsy evidence.
Yeah,
not tracing the bullet, not tracing the track of the throat wound, which they covered as a what do they call it, a tracheotomy, but it was really a bullet wound.
That's right.
Which makes sense because when Kennedy came from behind on the Zapruder film, he reached to his throat. Like that clearly was one of the first shots.
Of course, yeah. It's in terms of the body alteration stuff. David Lifton was the first guy, and Joe Rogan's a big David Lifton fan, so I don't want to say anything bad about David Lifton because I know a lot of people really like him. He just passed away recently too, and he did a lot of good research, and he unearthed some different documents and primary sources, but his core thesis is that their body alteration was done on Air Force One itself. And the issue is the only time the body was unattended, the ceremonial casket, which Kennedy was loaded onto Air Force One in, was unattended, was when LBJ was being sworn in. But that's for like 15, 20 minutes. So, they could have slipped him into a shipping casket at that time. I think that's plausible. I don't think there's proof that happened. All I'm saying is that that's plausible. I don't think it's plausible that somebody's like hacking him up, in the back. I just don't know that they would have had the expertise to do that. That's just a bridge too far for me. And then Doug Horn says that Doug Horn, who is the head of the military records on the Assassination Records Review Board, the chief investigator. So he's a guy who is there in the mix. Like Doug Horn is not just like some conspiracy theory guy. Like he's in the game. Like he's right there seeing everything. He says that there was basically like a switcheroo, and there's a motorcade with the ceremonial casket, and so Jackie Kennedy and Robert Kennedy and Seibert and O'Neill, my two favorite rogue FBI agents. When I say rogue, in that they undermine the official story tremendously by telling the truth. And so, but basically they're adamant that like we were with the casket the whole time because they drove in a motorcade through town. The argument is a chopper came and picked up Kennedy's body in the shipping casket and then landed in a parking lot next to Bethesda, and so obviously getting there half an hour earlier than the ceremonial casket, which gave them time to basically hack up the brain, take bullet fragments out of the brain and take out all the extra bullets, basically, is his argument. But the challenge I think there's definite evidence for the shipping casket, like very strong evidence for the shipping casket being there, and for two caskets arriving, and decent evidence for two caskets arriving at different times. But I think the evidence of a helicopter is nothing almost. It's one guy, Paul O'Connor, who says that he heard a chopper at 8 o'clock. But the chopper was supposed to arrive at 6:30 for this to all make sense. So this just that's kind of what I'm talking about, and zooming into the details. I just don't I think if there was a helicopter that landed there, now if you had 4 or 5 witnesses, like we do for the shipping casket, I would go, okay, I think that's a thing. But if we have one who didn't even see it, they heard it, and it was an hour and a half later than the timeline would require, I kind of have to go Occam's razor doesn't work there for me. You know what I mean?
Right. Jeez. Well,
one thing I want to point out real quick on the single bullet theory, just so the main thing for me, because I've listened to all the counter arguments and the arguments and gone back and forth, and the bottom line is it's all about the location of the back wound. That's the whole game. The whole game of the single bullet theory is the back wound location. Where is it? Yeah. Is it at T1, where the official Warren report puts it in the final autopsy?
T1 being the first thoracic vertebrae, not to get all anatomy and physiology on anybody.
First, basically, T1 would be like the base of the neck, right? First thoracic vertebra. And is it there, or is it T3? So there's an autopsy facing sheet, like a drawing of where the wounds are, and that shows it much lower than T1, around T3. The death certificate itself says T3. Like that's what it says on the death certificate. There's a photo of his back, and it looks like it's at T3. It doesn't look like it's at T1. Now it's way low. His head is tilted up to make it look like it's closer. There's trickery going on. But
so in that back wound, do you think? I mean, I'm not a huge ballistics expert again, but it seems like the entry wound has the small hole, the exit wound has a bigger hole. Do you think that was an entrance wound, the back one?
Yes.
Entrance. Okay, and where did it go?
It fell out at the hospital during
heart massages. That was the heart massage.
Exactly. Okay. And I almost think that the bullet fell out of Kennedy that Hoover said fell out of his head might be the one that went into his back. Like that would make a lot of sense. But they wouldn't want to disclose that because now the single bullet theory is over because that's supposed to have gone through Connolly.
Patrick, jump in here for a second, man. You're way more of a ballistic guy than I am. Does it make sense if something could travel into the lower shoulder under that lower scapula, I think it's called, and then possibly come out up by your neck trapezius area?
On a downward trajectory from a 6-story building.
Well, hitting bone and fragments happening, things like that. I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff bullets do inside of a body when they're hitting, going through things, and it's like the simplest way I could say is a bullet can be diverted from its trajectory by a blade of grass. So when it hits bone, comes apart, fragments, whatever, it's going to definitely change trajectory many times.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Now there's no argument that it hit any bones in Kennedy's body. The bone that started to happen when went through Connolly's body, according to the single bullet theory. So the thing for me, when I look at these all the and also the clothing, his suit coat and his shirt, they're consistent with T3. So we have 6 pieces of evidence that support that. And we have the Seibert and O'Neill report where they say that the wound wasn't very deep, and the counter argument is rigor mortis, but doctors know about rigor mortis, right?
That didn't set in for a while later too. So when you're talking about the time frame of this bullet spitting out, rigor mortis usually doesn't happen, and I'm no whatever. Anyway, I thought it would. Rigor mortis happens a little later. Something else, dude, and I don't know if you've ever heard this, and this comes from the gospel of the great JFK, Seer Weck, dude. When I interviewed him, and I even seen him on other broadcasts, where he's talking about, as part of the single bullet theory, is like, did the single bullet theory or single bullet hit both Kennedy and Connolly? So Connolly even says, like, I was looking forward, I heard the bullet, I recognized it as a rifle fire, I turned to my right, and by the time I turned to my left, Kennedy had already been hit, and Connolly was saying that's when I felt like I was hit. Something Cyril Wecht brought up, as Kennedy has clearly been hit, Connolly is holding his Stetson hat, which he says is absolutely impossible because one of the wounds on Connolly was to his ulnar, the ulna bone, and severed the ulna nerve. So you couldn't hold something like your hat or anything if your ulna nerves had been severed. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but that was just one of the things that substantiated why that first shot, they were 2 different shots. And even Connolly has said the first shot didn't hit him. He's even stated that.
Yeah, that's correct. And Cyril Wecht is a legend, I think. And I got to meet Mr. Wecht Dr. Wecht very briefly in November. I was down in Dallas for the JFK assassination conference. I went to the JV conference and the varsity conference. There's 2 conferences. The JV conference is like, dude, the JV conference, everybody there's got a book. There's a table in the back with like 90 books for sale. And all the books are like, Israel did it. Spider-Man did it.
The ice bullet, the shot from the fucking sewer drain. Like, that's what annoys.
Umbrella Man with a dart.
Yes,
like,
yes. Or William Cooper. As much as I got love for William Cooper,
right.
like, the driver did it. Like, come on now.
I know, exactly, dude. What's bad about that is that's really proliferating among younger people.
Oh, Behold a White Horse. It's everywhere. Yes, it's everywhere.
On Netflix, there's a documentary about the driver did it theory, but at any rate, sorry, what was I going? What were we talking about? I got off.
Well, can I bring up, just as 9/11, all the talk of holograms and all the crazy stuff with airplanes and all, I never was interested in any of that, remote control airplanes or whatever. It was always the things that led up to the factual things that led up to 9/11.
Yes.
That always interested me the most, and the potential folks involved in the assassination of President Kennedy is what, and this is just me. You guys are both much more well researched, outside of Fidel Castro, the mafia, Teamsters, the CIA, all these different groups or bureaucratic, departments, whatever it is. In my mind, after reading extensively on a lot of the documents that recently, came out not that long ago, the letters that Kennedy was writing to the leaders of Israel, Ben Gurion, and then his predecessor, or Kennedy was really putting the pressure on them for inspections of their nuclear reactors, their facilities, all those sort of things, and that's about as serious as it gets. I mean,
right.
In my mind, and we know the Mossad has done some things in the past that weren't real, upstanding. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I have I shouldn't say anything. Anyway, I'll tell you after the podcast is over. It's spicy.
No, but that is a layer that is I've heard as well, and it's worth looking into. I forget the exact name of it. It was a particular the nuclear region or the area where those guys were. trying to look it up now. But anyway, yeah, that's definitely something worth considering. Now, where did they do the whole?
The facility was called Demona, right?
Demona. Thank you, champ. Thank you. No, that's exactly what it is. But that doesn't change things. Like, and again, this is what I always enjoy entertaining. And I think when I first hit you up, Matt, I was like, dude, did you know that the mayor of Dallas was Earl Cabell? His brother was Charles Cabell, and after the Bay of Pigs, Kennedy fired Richard Bissell, Allen Dulles, and Charles Cabell, who had deep military and intelligence ties for years and years. So he was pissing off a lot of people. But that's one of those like kind of ancillary things people, or George de Mohrenschildt, or Ruth and Robert Payne, or David Atlee Phillips. These are names that go deep into the circumstantial shit that you could never pin down. Howard Hunt, Charles Harrelson possibly was involved. Woody Harrelson's dad. Yeah.
Well, the thing that makes this case such a great, whodunit is that there are so many people that had motive. Yes. So many institutions. Like, what you were saying about Israel, did they have motive? I'm sure that they would prefer someone that, supported their interests more than Kennedy. All I'm saying is, let's talk in the context of just going through the medical evidence. All right. So if there was a conspiracy, then that means that either the autopsy photographs or x-rays were altered, or there was body alteration. That's a requirement for there to be a conspiracy. So that means that there had to have been some military involvement at some level. That's like, so the Israel and the mafia can't.
Well, and when you look at, in
doctors at Bethesda.
In real time, not even just Bethesda, in Parkland, when they were trying to track the trace of the tracheotomy wound, I forget the admiral's name. He's like, no. I know on JFK was like, it's been duly noted, but basically some admiral, some military intelligence guy was like, he shut it down. The track of the
Galloway.
first, is that who it was?
I believe it's Galloway. But
and then you have Kennedy's press secretary coming out, hey, dude, he died from a bullet in the brain. If you look at, he's pointing almost to the exact temple area, right to the front temple. It's, man, it's
dude.
Crazy.
Talking about the temple, this is kind of jumping all over the place, but
it's all right. That's what we do here.
Tom Robinson, the guy, the mortician, the mortician who's in all the documents. This is not like some guy who claims to be the mortician. This is the official mortician in all of the records in the Warren Report. He says there was a hole in Kennedy's right front temple, and he filled it in with wax.
What?
A small little hole, looked like an entry wound. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
and there's 3 other people that say the same thing. But at any rate, we're talking about motives and who all would be interested. So that kind of gets to the ultimate question of who did it. And let me zoom out by saying I'm going to go there eventually. But season 1, I'm truly just trying to figure out like what's the most likely thing that happened on the big questions.
Yes.
And then what are the open questions and where do we go? It's like, for example, it's helpful to know your either ors, right? It's helpful to know that for the medical, like it's not possible that you can believe the autopsy evidence and also believe there was a shot from the front. Those two things are mutually exclusive.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So it also, the thing we discovered that to keep, to keep in mind for the future is that it appears there's someone impersonating Oswald. You talked about Ralph Yates earlier, and Ralph Yates is basically this guy that picks up a hitchhiker right next to Oswald's rooming house 2 days before the assassination, and the hitchhiker starts saying all this crazy stuff, talking about, oh, by the way, he's got a long bag that is a paper bag, and he says has curtain rods in it. Okay, this is 2 days before the assassination. And this hitchhiker starts talking about, he asks him for a ride to work, tells him, where he works. And he starts saying, hey, the president's coming in town soon. Do you think someone could kill him with a rifle from a tall building? And Yates is like, and what's funny is Yates like entertains it. He's like, I don't know, maybe if they were a really good shot. He doesn't go like, I don't know, psycho. He's like, perhaps let's talk about the details. But anyway, so Yates drops this guy off. And the place where he was dropped off, right. The Texas School Book Depository.
And who got him that job there? I believe it was George de Mohrenschildt, who had George Bush's number in his wallet when they.
So, the job is a little bit more complicated.
Okay.
Technically,
help me out.
It was Lenny Mae Randall, who was a neighbor 3 houses down the street from the Oswalds, and her brother was Buell Wesley Frazier, who's the guy that gave Oswald a ride to work that morning. And so Lenny Mae Randall had talked to Ruth Payne.
Didn't Mr. Frazier say the same thing when he took Oswald to work that day? He had a long thing, curtain rods. Didn't he say the same thing?
Exactly. That's the story. The story is curtain rods. So I bring and here's the crazy thing on Ralph Yates. Let me just finish that thought. So anyway, Yates gets back. This is the Wednesday. He tells his coworker Dempsey Jones about what happened. So we have someone that's verified this. And then he sees Oswald on TV and he goes, "That's the guy I gave a ride to." Okay. And by the way, we know that it couldn't have been the real Oswald
because he was working.
Because he was working at the time.
Yeah.
Okay. So and everything I'm talking about is from FBI reports. Okay.
And as we know from the Durham report, you cannot trust the FBI because, and it's weird. I'm totally digressing here, but we've all think like, wow, the FBI has just been weaponized, and oh my God, the FBI, the Justice Department, we forgot about our boy J. Edgar Hoover. He's been doing this shit for a long fucking time. But anyway, go ahead.
I'll play that game for a split second, and just by saying like, people are really bad at separating the idea, like the possibility that wait a minute. The bad things people say about Trump on a personal level could be true, and it also could be true the intelligence agencies are out of control and not acting in good faith. Like maybe both things are true.
Exactly. Wow. Walk and chew gum, people. Walk and chew gum.
But yeah, so Ralph Yates, so he then as I'm going on and on, but he ends up being brought in by the FBI for 4 different polygraphs. And there's a memo, there's an urgent teletype from J. Edgar Hoover himself saying you have to give this guy another polygraph and make him change his statement. Okay? Or he doesn't say, well, hang on. He doesn't say and make him change his statement. That's kind of implied. All right. So they give him another polygraph and they say, look, you've passed 4 polygraphs in a row, so we believe that you think what you're saying is true. But since it couldn't be possible, we're going to have to send you to this. We're going to commit you to this insane asylum. So he was involuntarily committed to an insane asylum as a 29-year-old who had 5 kids. Wow. In and out of insane asylums his whole life, died when he was 39. Wow. He got like 40 electric shock treatments, and he never recanted his story.
Wow.
And so if that was a standalone, you go, that's crazy.
No.
But there are like a dozen other examples of Oswald impersonators.
Well, not even just Oswald, and people who have been bald with this who, caught that quick dirt nap, like Roger Craig. I mean, there's hundreds. There's literally all too many, dude. And,
that's funny.
As we talk about this, dude, I've always thought with the Zapruder film, I've always just found it weird. Like Mary Mormon, there's so many other people who had their photographic evidence like quickly obfuscated and taken, but Zapruder gets like the fucking almost Steven Spielberg shot of the whole fucking thing. But has it been altered? Because I'm on everything I love. When I watch that thing, and I'm convinced that he was shot from the front, that final thing back into the left, shot from the front. But when I watch that video, I don't see that occipital parietal blowout that the people talk about. I see like this kind of flap on his right ear. I see him get hit in this kind of flap of human tissue and skull flap over his right ear. I don't see that back end blowout. And I don't know, man. How did he, Abraham Zapruder get that like prime time spot, but everybody else's photographic evidence gets taken? And do you think it had been altered? Because it's just, I think he was definitely hit from the front, but the video it doesn't necessarily look like he was hit from the back. Because like I said, that back into the left still happens. But what are your thoughts on the Zapruder film? And it could have been altered.
Well, in terms of what does it show? I mean, I kind of see the same thing you see, which is it looks like it's on the right side in the Zapruder film, but then there's this big pronounced back into the left motion, like somebody hit him in the right temple with a baseball bat, right?
Right.
So, I do think the thing is, it looks like it's a shot from the front, but when you zoom into all the evidence and everybody says there's a big hole in the back of his head, it's like kind of a shadow. If you really look at it, it kind of looks like someone, you like just used a marker over it or something. Now, just because it's totally black, but it's like a shadow.
But then this lends itself to the autopsy photos too, because you don't see that back blowout. You see this right side that's brain coming out on the right side, similar to what the video presents or the film presents.
Right. So, in terms of whether or not the Zapruder film was altered, the question, the way that it would have been altered is that some of the frames would have been removed. Okay. And I've actually talked to people who think that the big pronounced back and to the left was actually not as bad as it appears in the film, and it's made to look a lot. The back and to the left was made to look much more dramatic because they took out the rear head wound frames. Right, that's the idea. Like, so it looks like it's going faster. But so okay, what's the evidence? All right, blah blah blah, speculation. What's the evidence say? The evidence on this is the whole saga of NPIC, the National Photographic Interpretation Center. So what they did is they took films and they took individual frames of films and they blew them up to be very large so that people in the Defense Department and CIA, FBI, whatever, the high up national security agency, they could analyze them. So the Zapruder film was taken to NPIC to be, to have these briefing boards made, basically to have individual slides be blown up. And there's basically stories of two separate sets of films and briefing boards being made on different nights by different people. Okay. And so the first night, on Saturday night, you have Dino Brugioni, who, by the way, is not just some schmuck. He was like the chief information officer for NPIC, and ended up being pretty high ranking. And he says that he worked on the briefing boards that Saturday night, and that the Zapruder film that's available today does not show what he saw. He saw a huge blowout of brain matter up in the sky and backwards, and so consistent with what you would expect.
Consistent with, I mean, God love Clint Hill, the Secret Service agent right behind him, and what Jackie was supposedly reaching for. She wasn't just freaking out, jumping out of the car. Supposedly she was reaching for brain matter that had blown out of the back of his head.
Yeah, and some dude on TikTok came at me yesterday when I posted a clip, and he was like, well, "What about Clint Hill?" Clint Hill says that there was no injury in the rear of his head, and I sent him a quote and a citation to where he said there was a huge gaping hole in the back right side of his head. So there you go. That's the beauty of citations, baby.
Yes.
Because you're ready to go. You go, actually, no. Here's the site. But yeah, then the next night you got two other guys, Homer McMahon and Ben Hunter, who are also career NPIC officers, and they say that they worked on the Zapruder film on Sunday night. Okay, and here's what's really interesting. The guy who brought the film to them, he was a Secret Service agent. It seems like Bill Smith or something like that. It's like super common name. We mentioned it in the podcast. He says he had just gotten back and picked the film up at Hawkeye Works in Rochester, New York. Hawkeye Works is like the CIA, lab where like the best people with film are in the world. Okay.
Yeah.
It was a project between. Well, actually, it was a division of Kodak, and the CIA worked with them on some projects. You had to have like a security clearance to get in there. So anyway, there you go. So it's right there. So if you want to believe that it happened, then you can believe the testimony of those three guys. There's Doug Horn put a documentary together about it, and they testified under oath under the ARRB. Now, it's a little bit, there are two things that really throw a wrench into believing the Zapruder film was faked based on that information. And those are the testimony of Homer McMahon, one of the two guys on Saturday, who said that he had senile dementia and he wouldn't trust anything he says. That's in the record. It's like, well, okay. But keep in mind, the other guys there, there were two guys that testified to the same thing. And okay, one of them's got dementia. The other guy's still saying the same thing. But then the other issue is there's an expert who wrote a 150-page report, and he's like the main expert in the field of photographic and film forgeries, who of course does a lot of work for the Department of Defense, or had anyway. And he said that it's authentic. So there you go. You can believe what you want. You can go, hey, that guy, he's an insider, and he's just saying what they want him to say. And why would these other three guys lie? They have nothing to gain from it, and that kind of matches what we would expect. Or you can go, see, look, this guy's got dementia. These two guys don't know what they're talking about because the expert proved him wrong. So it's a choose your own adventure, whatever you want to believe.
Choose your own adventure.
Have fun out there, I say.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's it's one of those it's one of those things like I've never delved deep into, and I'm so glad you did, dude. And I'm hoping people are actually benefiting from this conversation and going down the rabbit hole in their own way, because I don't know, man. There's so much to this, because I don't know. Anyway, Patrick, any questions? Jump in, brother.
No, I mean, I keep going back to who ultimately is responsible for it. I mean, are we ever gonna know? I mean, I as I stated before, who has the biggest reason for, if it's a murder case?
Key bono, baby. Key bono. Who benefits? Yes.
You want to quick? Sorry, go ahead.
We're talking national security. I mean, we're not just talking drug running. We're not talking Teamster stuff. We're not talking just racketeering. We're talking national security of Israel and the way the Israelis saw it back then. I mean, it's. I don't think it's got anything to do with. The best way to put it is who's got the biggest reason to kill somebody.
Right.
There are many, and I'm just going to throw this in here, man. And as well as a very underplayed component to all this, the aerospace industry. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah, no, that makes sense too. I mean, the big ones that come to mind, right? So you got Oswald, and then you got Oswald with the Cubans, Oswald with the Russians, right? And those arguments are not, actually arguments for second shooters. They're just arguments that, there's a conspiracy in that Oswald was working with the Russians, right? Or, some people could say there's a second shooter, but the main argument, if you're saying it's Russians or Cubans, that's like the hipster Warren Report defender position. It's like, it was a conspiracy. It's not what you think. You know what I mean? And then,
but what world, honestly, bro, what world? I mean, even in the 60s, like he was 20, whatever. Hey, I'm a Marine. I want to defect. And he defects, gets a girl, hangs out there, and then comes back with this Russian girl, whose Russian girl has ties to Russian intelligence. Like, when does that ever happen?
She's KGB too.
Yeah, I mean, that's like so that's on its face. That alone. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry.
I'm gonna go deep, but no, I know it's important. I'm gonna go deep on that in season 2, and I'm looking forward to that. But just on the who benefits. Okay, so conspirators. You've got the Secret Service as a conspirator, and why I don't really know, but they didn't have a ton of motive actually necessarily. But in terms of the big motives, FBI, Hoover, didn't like that RFK was kind of stepping on his toes, and basically, just he always wanted to have control. I personally don't think that Hoover was the motivating like catalyst factor. No. But you've got, I mean, let's talk about the ones most people think it is. Okay, LBJ and Texas Oil. People sort of combine those. I used to think that LBJ was the man. I used to think that hey, E. Howard Hunt told us. He gave a deathbed confession and he put LBJ at the top and, whatever. But that's, once you learn more about that, you go, that's kind of self-serving because,
his dying breath, he was ready to spill that bullshit, dude.
Well, yeah, exactly. Well, what's interesting is it wasn't really a deathbed confession. He lived a few more years after that, but he thought he was dying. So but anyway, LBJ, there's a whole thing about in The Men Who Killed Kennedy about this party the night before, and he goes in, he's like, I'm gonna kill those Kennedy boys, basically. He says something.
And his mistress, who was on the Geraldo show,
Madeline Brown,
Yes.
So that's kind of at the JV conference they entertain that, but at the varsity conference they don't.
No, because it's bullshit.
So anyway, but I haven't dug into the details just to do away with it. Did LBJ have foreknowledge? Possibly, although I don't know. But I really don't know. But I hope to learn.
No, you're and it's one of those things you can never prove. But these powers just happen to coalesce on this day. Earl Cabell, the brother of Charles Cabell, Texas Senator Lyndon Johnson. I mean, it just. There's a lot going on, man. It's hard to put a finger on who. I don't know if I asked you about Mac Wallace. Supposedly, Mac Wallace, who's Malcolm Wallace, supposedly one of Lyndon Johnson's kind of hitmen. His palm print was found not in the same place where Oswald's supposed to have shot, but on the other side of the building. I mean, these are just all these different things, which makes you just like, what the fuck is going on?
Well, there were 2 shooters cited by a lot of people, so that would make sense with the Mac Wallace thing. I mean, I'm going to withhold judgment on that until I go deep into it, which I will. But I'll just tell for anybody who's stuck around this long to the end, I think it would be good to share what the prevailing wisdom is. I'll give away the game real quick, but I just so here's the thing. This is not a proof, so I'm not able to provide citations for this. I'm just telling you, among people at the varsity conference, this is what everybody thinks. All right, and it's this, and it's not unanimous. People disagree about different things, but generally, the CIA was working with the mafia already to try to kill Castro, with the mafia folks who lost their casinos when Castro took over.
Which they had been working with, like fucking like Luciano back in the day, controlling the New York harbors. Like this alliance has been inextricable for a very long time. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, there's a longer story about Nixon bringing the mafia in, and Watergate being related to Howard Hughes and the JFK assassination. And
Howard Hughes is
CIA
what?
When the mafia.
Howard Hughes is what? The aerospace industry once again.
There you go. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I mean, this guy Mayhew was like the main liaison at first between the CIA and the mafia. But anyway, so you got the mafia, you got Cuban exiles, and even Kennedy himself. Operation Mongoose was, he was basically trying to fuck with Cuba as much as possible without triggering a nuclear war, right? He was like, and he was probably more conservative on it than the generals were. The generals didn't care. They're like, fuck it, let's go.
Dude, Lemnitz are fuck, dude. They were ready to scorch the earth, dude.
Right, exactly. And that led, they butted heads on that later. So yeah, the military industrial complex and the generals, they all hated Kennedy because basically he was pursuing peace. He came in as a hawk for sure, and then he turned to peace. There's always a debate, like, was Kennedy like going to escalate Vietnam War and all these things? And evidence goes both ways, because he came in as a hawk and then he found out what was actually going on, and then he became a dove. Like that's.
And not to get too deep into that aerospace thing, he was trying to create a mutual alliance between the Russians and us to the space race together, to go to the moon together. So you're pissing off again a lot of people, and even the larger context of what he was inheriting with in the Middle East, Gabal Abdel Nasser. I mean, that there was a lot of. I mean, the John Foster Dulleses and the Allen Dulles of the world cannot be underestimated as far as what Kennedy was inheriting in 1960 when he got into office. Yeah. You start talking about who he pissed off and who killed him, and all, I mean, you're talking about a lot of shit. You're unpackaging a lot of 30, 40 years. Like I said, going back to Lucky Luciano and guarding the docks from World War II and shit. I mean, it's deep. It's deep.
Let me just give you one little nugget. I think you'll appreciate this. So just to tie a bow on who the varsity conference of JFK assassination folks think did it, they think it's Project ZR Rifle, which is the CIA working with the Cuban exiles and the mafia together to try to kill Castro. That was basically like a subgroup of that. And it was all the people that hated Kennedy, that were all tight with Dulles and the three guys that just got fired. And they weren't really supervised because it was top secret. And they turned that operation on Kennedy. That's the prevailing wisdom.
It's kind of one of your early instances of what we see now, these private security forces that are kind of off grid and offline. That's essentially what it was, man. I mean, when you look
if you're ever bored and you're like want to find some stuff to watch after you've listened to every episode of both of our podcasts, of course. There's a guy named Daniel Sheehan, and he in like 2016 he taught a course on the JFK assassination at UC Santa Barbara, I believe, and the whole course is online. The whole thing's online, but he basically goes through kind of what he thinks happened. And okay, who cares, right? It's just some guy. Well, he's not just some guy. He's a lawyer who worked for F. Lee Bailey. And so he worked for Bailey when the famous lawyer, he was O.J. Simpson lawyer,
yes,
did all kinds of things. He worked for F. Lee Bailey when they represented Santos Trafficante and Bernard Barker, the Watergate burglar, CIA Watergate
Santos
burglar.
Trafficante, former Florida head of the mafia.
So he basically just tells his class, and it's on YouTube still, right now anyway. He tells his class what Santos Trafficante told him, which is the Project ZR Rifle story.
Oh, what a tangled web we weave. Patrick J., we've kept this young man long enough. Jump in here. Any questions, any comments? Jump in there, man.
I'm just learning and trying to keep up, to be honest with you.
Isn't it crazy, though? Seriously. That
it's such a tangled web. It's ridiculous.
I mean, just for me, man, and it's not about me, but just my perception of this as a kid, like realizing, like, wait a minute. All this all these things of these organizing narratives of our country, who we are, but yet our president could be publicly fucking executed in broad daylight, sitting next to his wife when his son's birthday is that following Sunday, and they later kill him.
Right. That's a whole other thing, yeah.
Well, I mean, it is my belief, and I think it's I think it's very clear, to be honest with you, that, post World War II, the fly swatter comes down on Germany. The Nazis spread out like cockroaches all over the planet, are absorbed into governments in numerous places around the world, start a lot of, the UN and other organizations. I mean, some shaky shit going on since then, right?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Definitely. Well, hey, I want to tell you guys something on the other side, so stick around for a second if I can.
Absolutely. No, Matthew Crumpton right here. Matt Crumpton, he is solving the JFK podcast. He's the host, and he's killing it over there. Check it out, man. For whatever we scratched the surface on today, he's going so much deeper into it. And again, as somebody who's been messing with this topic for a long time, I learned some stuff, which is cool. Never stop learning. Matt, any social networking, where can we find what you are doing and what you're up to, brother?
Yeah, man, it's solvingjfkpodcast.com is the website, and I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just search for Solving JFK Podcast.
He's doing the Lord's work. Peace and so much love, you guys. Champ, love you, brother, and stick around. There will be more. Holla.